Ladies and
I
gentlemen, we
get you.
have some exciting news for you. I am Derek Culpepper, and this is my lovely wife,
Lakisha Culpepper.
Lakisha Culpepper. She left something off, but we'll add that in a second. But we have an important announcement today. My wife has supported me in my endeavor of becoming a police officer, and now it's time to tell you about what she's been doing for the past few months. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Dr. Lakisha Culpepper, the author of Leftovers, and Hand Me Downs.
That's it. It's a mouthful. It's a mouthful. Thank you so much, Derek. It's good to be visiting with you today about this topic.
I'm so excited for this announcement because
Yeah.
you've been very supportive of me and my endeavors and our
Yeah.
family, and I know you spent a lot of time putting your thoughts on paper
Hmm.
to be a blessing to everybody that reads it, and it's time for us to hear about what you've been doing. And so, tell us, who is Dr. Lakisha Culpepper?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think it's interesting that you asked that question first because if you go to purchase the book right now where it is available, which is on Amazon, Amazon Kindle to be specific, it actually is listed as having two authors. And that initially was an error on my part because I never had published a book on Amazon before, and so I didn't really know what I was doing. And so one of the authors reads as Lakisha Culpepper, and then the other author reads as Dr. Lakisha Culpepper. But in hindsight, I decided I was going to keep them there really for this very reason. And so I think what's interesting is you go through this process of becoming an officer, becoming a doctor, becoming a whatever, and people assume that you're going to change, you're going to be a different person. And the truth is, in some ways, you do. So I feel like Dr. Lakisha Culpepper now is still Lakisha Culpepper, born in Chicago, raised between North Carolina, Oklahoma City, and all these little places in between, by my great grandmother, who this book is really largely about, having lived a life full of great joy and pretty significant trauma and tragedy, all the way to mother and wife and educator, woman of God, all the things, right, that I am now. And so that's a big question. I am who I was in the depths of my youth when I was afraid and oftentimes uncertain about my life and where I would end up. Because, as you know, I didn't have my mom or my father in my life. I was raised primarily by my great grandmother or family members who just kind of ended up with me from time to time, right? And so I'm still that little girl. I'm still that person that I was there when I vividly remember being left alone in a home that my mother and I rented together because she had been incarcerated and I was 5 and nobody knew I was there. And I was there for weeks by myself until a neighbor found me. So I'm still that little girl, and there's still some moments when that little girl appears and the fear and the uncertainty of who she is rise up in me. But I'm also this well-rounded doctor of education who knows all the things, knows all the strategies and the research and the authors that you should read to be able to pour into your own children, to educate them and to deal with their social and emotional learning. And the two of those people, little Keisha, like 5-year-old little Keisha, and 45, about to be 46-year-old Keisha, live in the same body. But what happens now through prayer and motivation, counseling, and really my writing is that those two people console each other. And so this grown, full, all put together at times, Keisha, sometimes a mess, consoles that other part of me, who for a long time I saw in a very negative way. But this book was really about me telling the story and all of the negative that it was, but then really going back and rewriting that same story and adding in all of the positive that was there all along that oftentimes we don't see when we're going through hell and high water, because that's really what it feels like. And so I'm all those things. I'm both.
When did you realize you had a passion to write?
Yeah, so always. So interestingly enough, so I used to lock my cousins up, and Kevin can tell you, like I used to force everybody to play school. I was always the teacher. And so I always knew that I wanted to teach and be an educator, but I always had a passion for reading. So my great aunt Linda took me to the library to get my first library card. I remember vividly. I was in elementary school. I actually still have the very first book that I ever owned that I used to teach myself to read. So when I was in North Carolina with my mom, again, it was very trying, but I was in advanced kind of gifted classes then because I was a pretty naturally gifted kid. But when I came to Oklahoma, interestingly enough, and I know this now, because of the trauma I experienced, leaving my mother, going back and forth, watching her years of drug use, a lot of the things that I was exposed to. When I came to Oklahoma, I really struggled in school. I did not want to do it. I did not want to engage. I did not want to participate. And so there was a time in my academic career when I first came as a student in Oklahoma where they tried to test me for special education classes because they thought that I couldn't read. And at that time I had stopped reading. I had stopped reading and really had kind of stopped functioning. And I think it was around about the age of 5 or 6. And so when they put me in those classes, interestingly enough, it's an IQ test, right? It's a traditional IQ test. What they found was that I was gifted even then, right? So then they put you in this program called Promise, which just took you away from the school. But I still had so much baggage, so much that I was dealing with as a little person that I still didn't read. And for a long time, I didn't read and I didn't write, but I imagined and I visualized and I thought about things. I thought about things very deeply. But then I found a copy of Danny and the Dinosaur, which is super cool because it's on my shelf right now. And I remember teaching myself how to read again with that book and looking at the pictures. And I memorized the book initially just through repetition from start to finish. And then just that's how I started to read and make associations. And so I still wasn't a strong reader or student really until much later in my academic career because number one, I had all this trauma that I was carrying with me. Number two, I was severely dyslexic and went undiagnosed for many years. And so because of those things, writing was scary for me and so was reading. But my Aunt Linda really encouraged me to do that. And so I started in elementary school to really just take books with me. I wasn't even reading a lot of them, but I was holding to them. By middle school, I had a teacher. Her name was Jane McClure. I'll never forget. I spent most of the my time in middle school in in-school suspension because I would get in trouble. I would pop off at the mouth. I would start a fight. I would do something unruly to really be removed from class because I was stealing Harlequin romance novels from Aunt Linda and reading them. And of course, not at all appropriate for a middle school kid, right? Because it's all about romance and love and being whisked away. It's still some of my favorite stories to this day, not because of the content, but because of the feelings of positivity and nostalgia I have with those stories, because those were her stories, right? And so I would get in trouble in middle school, and then I would go to in-school suspension where I would read these, trashy books basically all day and rush through my work because it wasn't hard for me. I just was so disengaged though. But what was interesting is Jane McClure, who I wish I could find to this day, and I've tried to find, who was my middle school English teacher, reading teacher. She did a unit on poetry. Mm-hmm. And what was interesting is that was the first time I had really had the space to write whatever I wanted to without rules. Because before, writing and reading was so strict in school, so regulated. You had to write about this, you had to do this. But she was like, oh, you can just write about whatever you want in this poetry unit. And so I began to write these poems that were pretty deep in content and emotion. And she saw that in me. And she gave me a copy of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. And she signed the front and wrote, I'll be waiting for you to win a Pulitzer. And I actually have that book upstairs. And so it was just those kinds of moments where I knew I wanted to write, I knew I wanted to teach, I knew I wanted to impart. But more than anything, I just wanted to tell the story. I wanted to tell the story of my life and just the things that were important to me, the stories of us.
Yeah, and I like that because that leads me to my next question. You as an educator, mm-hmm. Choosing that profession, mm-hmm. With your life experience and with your joy to read and those things like that. Tell us about your education, about your journey as a professional in education. You went from classroom teacher to principal and your different degrees and things like that. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so pretty interesting. So started as a classroom teacher, which really is what I wanted to be and what I still want to be when I grow up, right? I just love teaching, right? But was really encouraged to move around and to do some different things. And so I became an instructional coach first. The title was a little different, but that's in essence what it was. But primarily what my role was in that career was to support teachers who were in need of assistance, who were really struggling in their classroom instruction or management, to go in and try to really help them either improve or support them in some type of way so that we could see some positive change. And while that was a very hard and taxing career for me, it was important because I really learned to navigate, even more so than I had before, people, and how to have hard conversations with people, how to really find improvement areas, even for really good teachers. Because interestingly enough, once I did that, so I did that job for 3 years, I had principals who would call me and would also ask me to refine good teachers. So it wasn't always teachers that were really, really struggling. Sometimes it was teachers that were doing well, or teachers that they saw great potential in, but they felt like might need minor tweaks or changes. And so it allowed me to be able to really be analytical in my instruction and in my work. And so it was a great opportunity for me as an educator. And then, yes, I went into campus administration, assistant principal, campus principal, and now my role is in the community. And so I do all of those things, but I do them front facing, so educating parents and the communities on all the things we do and establishing and building partnerships between us and schools.
Well, I can tell
and
you,
the
I've
community.
appreciated seeing your journey. You know, as a teacher and as a principal, assistant principal, and then a head principal, and leading schools and leading teachers, and going to complete your doctorate degree,
Yeah.
and the speaking engagements and things where you've had where other districts have called you to come in and speak to the teachers, and then even your work with the Gatsby, I think I'm saying it right.
GAPSI.
GAPSI
Yeah.
and those organizations, and so I've enjoyed seeing it because I like going with you, right?
Yeah,
To be
me
your
too.
support, and to see the way that you have impacted people for over, your professional career for over 22 years now,
Yeah.
and your passion that you have for it, even at the university level. With what universities are the ones that you taught
So
for?
right
Yeah.
now, it's been a few. So I'm summer, so I'm not teaching at Dallas College, but typically I'm at Dallas College, or I have been, had the opportunity to do that. But this summer I'm working with master's level students at UNT who want to become principals. And within our district, we have a teacher prep program that I have an opportunity to teach classes. But the cool part is, like, because I've been here such a long time, I also just get to mentor up and coming teachers and people who are thinking about going in education, and to be a resource for them. And that's important to me too. So in various capacities, teaching, sharing, really building capacity in others.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. So my next question is, what led you to title the book "Leftovers and Hand-Me-Downs"? What that is a
Yeah.
very unique title.
Yeah.
Tell me about why that's the title.
So because that was my life, right? And so if I were in an auditorium right now or in a room full of viewers, I'd say, raise your hand if you've ever eaten a leftover or wore a hand-me-down, right? And overwhelmingly, everybody in my family would raise their hands for both of those things. So my great-grandmother, Marie Dorothy Foster, who was born in 1909, lived through the Great Depression, all these things, right? She was a survivor. She was in North Carolina. Her mother was white. Her father was black. And so just the racial and cultural things that you go through. She cleaned house for a white woman and a white family. So she was a maid in essence. And so her whole life was really about making ends meet and what that meant. So making clothes for us, and or ensuring that we had clothes by repairing the clothes of other older cousins or older siblings, was something that was normal for us. So to get a new pair of shoes, to get a new outfit, that was a foreign concept to me growing up. Even once we moved to Oklahoma, we would buy many of our outfits and clothes, and we would do back to school at Goodwill or at thrift stores, which is still one of my favorite things to do today. Like, I still love thrifting. Now, don't get me wrong, I love a new pair of shoes too, but thrifting and working, to make ends meet is still really deeply rooted into who I am. And so I think of my grandmother, I think of those experiences. Same with leftovers. Like, she was a master chef before that was even a thing. She could take whatever remained, whatever scraps from this meal and this lunch and this breakfast, and put them together and create a culinary masterpiece for 8 children, and then later 16, 18 grandchildren, most of which she was the primary caregiver for, and not to mention great grand, which is where I come in. And so watching her put those things together as the matriarch of our family is what really prompted me to title the book after her. But honestly, it also are the things that to me really reflect who I am, right? So fundamentally, I believe in recycling and reusing and repurposing, and seeing the value in things probably far past when other people see them. I think that's a quality that is an asset for me, because that's truly the perception I have when I'm dealing with students, when I'm dealing with upset families, when I'm dealing with administrators, when I'm dealing with whatever, right? The idea that this person is coming to you, and no matter how ugly they've spoken, or no matter what awful thing they might have said or done, there's still an opportunity to make it fresh again, to make it new again, to make it useful, purposeful, and of value, maybe if not for you directly, for someone else. And so it really is the fiber of who I am. And so when I was trying to think of a title that really encapsulated all that I am and all of the words that I put in these very few pages, because I call it a micro book because it's only 12 pages long. So most people can read that in one sit down. But when you read it, that's really what echoes in every chapter for me.
You know, they say it don't really take long to learn a lesson. You ain't got to have no whole bunch of pages or steps, because you can read 2 or 3 sentences that in of a quote or something that can change your life forever.
Yeah.
You know, and we live in a society where where a lot of people like new, a lot of people don't like leftovers and hand-me-downs. That nobody really wants to wear it, even in school. You know, with peer pressure, all the cool kids want something new.
Sure.
Nobody wanted nothing from the Goodwill or from the
Yep.
thrift store. You know, they thought people would talk about them, but in reality in life, that is a good lesson to be able to take what you have and to make it work, or to take something somebody has given you. Matter of fact, I believe that's the story behind gumbo, if I'm not right, because gumbo is a mixture of everything,
It's
right?
a little bit of everything.
So it's something left over from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Whatever you got left over, put it all together, and you got gumbo, right?
Yeah.
And so, and even you mentioned recycling, and when you talk with kids and giving them a chance, right? Because in our society, people don't like giving second chances or doing things seconds or being patient with people.
Yeah.
And so this book, by title alone, is a grabber. Leftover and hand-me-downs. And matter of fact, what audience are you trying to reach, or you think will be reached by reading this book? Because in my mind, I'm going to ask you, but in my mind, I'm thinking it reaches everybody, because it can teach kids a lesson, and it can also teach adults to be thankful.
Yeah.
Look back and be thankful. But I'll let you share, you know, about the audience and what you believe they'll get out of reading your book.
Yeah, and I thought about that a lot because, you know, of course, my history and my background and things I've shared with you as my husband that I haven't shared with anyone, that I endured as a kid. So I was very careful not to put anything too heavy and too dark in the pages of this book. Now, there are some moments that I definitely give you a glimpse behind that veil. And I did that because I really wanted it to be accessible to our children. And so right now we have a middle schooler all the way up to grown children. And so I really wanted our 7th grader to be able to pick this book up and read it, right? And so that was my thought, is anywhere from middle school beyond, these are important lessons. But of course, in excerpts, and, you know, parents can decide any age can benefit from it, because like I said, originally it was just me telling the story, like almost like a verbal vomit, or a written vomit, if you will, to get it all out, to get out some things that I wanted to say. That was the first write. But then I went in for the rewrite, which was, okay, yes, this thing happened, but God was there, and this is how I know, in every single one of those moments. And so it's my hope that as people read it, that they are inspired and they are encouraged, and that they maybe even hear the whispers of their grandparents' voices as they go through the pages. Because I did lean a lot into the lessons that my great-grandmother had taught me.
You know, when I was looking at it, you know, and you say it's 12 pages, and I get that. But when you look at it, so many people, even myself, will be able to relate from a life experience and say, man, I went through something like that. Because I think when you can relate to people, obviously it's more meaningful.
Sure.
And I think each chapter you have in that book can be another book.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
think so,
because if
probably.
you are discussion, right? And I think that's what people are seeing. Actually, when I was thinking about that, I was like, man, that could be the next book is a book over just that.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you, anybody you talk to, half the room, no, probably 90% of the room, going to be able to relate to one of those sections in that book, or be able to relate to something.
Yeah.
And then the discussion about the realization of this happening, or being able to identify how has this changed me over the years, how can I heal, and then how can I be a blessing to somebody else, or how can I teach my children to be thankful and to be appreciative for leftovers and hand-me-downs, right? Because a lot of people aren't appreciative of that, but when you think about the totality of what it does to the soul, to the mind, and the body, just reflecting back
Yeah.
and being thankful for where they came from, and to take those experiences, even though they were maybe hurtful or not the best at the time, but they've made you part of who you are.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
so that's what I was thinking about. So next question I have for you is where can you find the book?
So it is available on Amazon.com, right? It's a little tricky because it is only available right now as an ebook. And so what I was telling friends is, so you can order it. It's $9, $9.99. So less than $1 a page, right? But it's about $9, about $10. So you can order it there and you get an electronic copy. But actually, if you have Kindle Unlimited, which some people have, or you can always download the Kindle app and sign up for a subscription for Kindle Unlimited, and you actually get it free. So either way, but both Kindle products, so either Amazon Kindle or through Kindle Unlimited.
So with your life experiences as an educator, as a speaker, as a host, as a organizer, as a university professor, all of this training you do, are you open to workshops and doing events and book signings when you come out on hard copy?
I
Are
feel
you
like
open consulting?
I feel like you're trying to give me another job.
I'm
Like,
t- People need to hear what you got to say,
yes,
because you bless. I mean, you bless so many people. When I go to these events with you, and I see people's responses to the material that you're presenting, and I see people respond with questions after that, and how they want your email address and want to keep in touch, and you do these things because you're being a blessing to other people. And I believe this book, when people read it, they're going to want to know more. I believe they're going to want to express and tell you what happened to them
yeah,
and
oh,
how
sure.
it relates. You know, so I'm not necessarily trying to give you another job. However, when people order your book,
Yeah,
I truly believe when they read and they see what I saw, they're going to have questions.
yeah,
Because I
I'm
think
open.
that's the way your book is written. It leads you to more.
It
Like
does.
it's like a sequel. Like what's next? Or how did you overcome this? How in the world did a young lady that had a mother that had some issues growing up, how you being raised by cousins in Oklahoma City, not being raised with your dad and your mom, you know, having to go through this and did that, how in the world have you accomplished so much in a short period of time and been given these awards, testifying in Austin for law? How have you been able to overcome all of this based off the things that took place in your youth?
Yeah, so it's nothing but the grace of God. Like, I don't take it for granted. I don't take it lightly, and I take no credit, right? There are people who have experienced similar things as I did, or even things less traumatic, that were unable to make it out and to make it through. And so I consider it God's favor. And honestly, the prayers of my great grandmother, the prayers of those cousins and family members who I know I drove crazy as a young girl, because we laugh about it now. I remember bringing you home and they said, "Oh, Derek, you have our sympathy." You know, that's still a going joke, right? Because they knew like I was struggling with life. And for me, I was fighting all the time because once I realized, hey, I'm being abused. Like, you know, when you're groomed as a young child and don't know you're being abused until later the light bulbs comes on, like there is some anger and some frustration and some terror that goes beyond fear that can grab a hold to you in a way that paralyzes you. It can paralyze you. And I really feel like that's what my mom experienced, which is why even in her later years of her life before she passed, we were able to have a really good relationship that I feel like was reconciled. And that's because I could see very clearly that if not for the grace of God, there go I. My mother's coping mechanism very early on was alcohol, then it was drugs, it was prescription drugs. So that's how she coped. My grandmother gave birth to my mother when she was 13. And we're sure that it was something strange going on, that whether it was incest or rape, there was something to that. Because my 13-year-old grandmother wasn't trying to have my mother. And so my mother was the first of many and raised all of her siblings, experienced God knows what, and made choices that she made for the reason she made them, that at the time she thought that's what she needed to do. Yeah. And what it looked like to me was abandonment, unable to raise her children, in and out of rehab, in and out of jail. But she was doing the best she could. Yeah. And if not for the grace of God, that would have been my story that my children would be telling about me. Now, they're going to tell some stories about me, I'm sure. They already do, because none of us are perfect. And we all have things that we can learn and grow from. But the reality is any one of us, whether we know it or not, could find ourselves in the same situation very easily.
Well, I can tell you, you're certainly a blessing to our family. Your story, your history, your past, your present, and your future, they're all bright, and we're so thankful. And ladies and gentlemen, before we get final thoughts from Dr. Lakisha Culpepper, we'll put the information on where you can order the book, which is on Amazon, and her contact information at the bottom. So if you want to contact her, if you got any questions, you got any events or anything that's online that's happening where you want to discuss the book, she may or may not be open to that. I don't know.
I'm open.
But I'm certainly going to help her do everything she can, because this book is a must read, ladies and gentlemen. Just get it. Even your kids will be able to learn from it. And so, Dr. Lakisha Culpepper, if you would give us your final thoughts before we go.
Yeah, so I think my final thoughts are just thank you. And in the book, as you know, like part of the dedication is really to you, for really, number one, loving me through me finding myself at this stage. And I know you're going to love me through me finding myself over the next 20 years, because we grow and change. But thank you for encouraging me to do it. Thank you for giving me the space to do it. And really pushing me to even tell people that I've done it. Because like you said, I wrote it a little bit ago and just kind of kept it to myself. And so thank you for inspiring me to be brave enough, because it is near and dear to my heart, but brave enough to share it. So thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. And be sure to go to Amazon and get your digital copy for Kindle and leftovers and hand-me-downs, and I'm sure that you will be blessed. And so until we meet again, adios from the Culpeppers, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.